We're celebrating Easter today, which is an ancient pagan holiday, which is kind of fun. I did read a little research on it. The Saxon goddess Ostara, which is where Easter comes from, was out bringing springtime and found a little bird that's little wings were frozen to the ground. And so she changed it into the Easter bunny and allows him to come once a year and lays eggs because he's still a bird. So we have that overlaid with the story of Jesus and the resurrection, the crucifixion and the resurrection. Can you hear me okay? Because I tend to quiet down for some reason. But my sister called me this morning from Florida and she brought me the cutest little joke. She said that there was a minister who was getting ready to give his Easter talk and asked, does anyone in the audience know what the resurrection is? And this little boy stood up and he says, well, I don't know what it is, but I do know that after 4 hours you should go to the hospital. Yeah. So thank you, Religious Science Church of St. Petersburg, Florida. That cute little thing. The first thing that I want to tell you this morning is that I know that we are all sacred, divine beings. Yay. And that we are sharing together our perspectives, our sacred paths, our pain, our suffering. And that I am up here before you sharing my path, my musings, my puzzlements about how this fits together. But that you can take what you like and leave the rest. If you find me completely obnoxious, it's okay. I don't mind. As I was meditating this morning, Spirit said, I said, wash us all clean of the divine disease, or not the divine, the great disease, like Patty was saying. And he said, well, you can't wash one thread in a rug without washing all the others. So I thought that was really beautiful. So what I want to do today is give you a history lesson about what happened on that Sunday, that Friday actually, 2,000 years ago. But I want to overlay my own thoughts in terms of the correlation of how that fits into all of our own lives. So I'm going to go back and forth between what happened and how I interpret it. So Jesus arrived in Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, and during that week before he was arrested, he went into the temple to do his healing work and discovered that there was a great deal of corruption and hypocrisy and, assorted other stuff. So the chieftains, the chieftains and the money changers and whatnot were highly angered at what he had done and began to look for someone who could identify him to be arrested. In my interpretation, those chief priests represent our fears and our ego, which we're going to use Eckhart Tolle's definition, which is our unconscious identity with thought. So when we become conscious of our divine nature, we have moments of clarity and realize that we somehow get outside of our fears and look in, and they're not really us. They're not who we are. So we took Jesus before Pontius Pilate and demanded his crucifixion. You want to kill what you're afraid of most, don't you? So you want it to stop, whatever that takes. And so Jesus went before Pontius Pilate and they demanded his crucifixion. And I thought to myself, don't we do that on a daily basis? I don't know about you, but I do. I can get out the cat of nine tails any moment of the day. In fact, over something that's so incredulously stupid. I mean, something to the effect of, you ate a jelly bean on Easter Sunday because it's sugar, I mean, it's insanity. It truly is. So anything and everything is up for excruciating detail and observation. And what can we find to torture Jenny over today? The condition of my body, whether I've exercised or not. When was the last time I exercised? This condition of my romantic life, this condition of my checkbook, you name it. It's all up for condemnation. So Jesus is in front of Pontius Pilate and he says, I understand that you think you are the Son of God. And Jesus said, so say you. So Pontius tells the priest, he's like, I don't see anything that this guy has done to deserve death. And they're like, we don't care, it doesn't matter, just kill him anyway. But Jesus did not need to defend himself to the illusion of his fears and supposedly what they thought he should be killed for, but he stood there present and peaceful. He knew the night before, and what occurred to me this morning was that this whole story is about the final death of his ego and him rising to his divinity. That's what the whole, for me, in this particular moment, that's what this story is about. The night before, in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he knew that Judas was coming to identify him and he was to be arrested, he said, "Take this cup from me," which means that was one of his last death throes of his ego. His fear was coming up because he knew that it was time for his divinity to show up, but that the next few hours, the death throes of his fears and condemnations and judgments was not necessarily going to be pretty. So anyway, they're out there screaming and yelling and all of that, and Pontius Pilate says, "I don't see any reason to put this man to death. But who would you rather save? Jesus, in essence, our divine selves, or Barabbas, who was the murderer, the usurper, the rebel?" In my case, represents that bully that comes up inside of us, the pain body, who would come up and slash and hack whoever it was that appeared to attack our belief systems, our identity, who we think we are. So they crucified Jesus. In our lives, that means we temporarily go unconscious, while it appears that we can actually torture our divine selves. But that's not possible, is it? In absolute terms, that our divine selves are not touchable. It's not. It is a mirror. It reminds me of Don Quixote. He's out there slashing his sword at these windmills who he thinks is something else. I mean, I thought, what a beautiful metaphor for when we're in our feared state, the kinds of crazy wars that we carry on about what someone else has done to us, our judgments, what somebody else said. It's all a lie. It's all a mirror. You ever been in a circus where you go in and you look in the mirrors, or they have those, I've never actually seen one, but you know, you go in and the girl turns into a gorilla. We really have to remember those things when we're at the very basic terror of whatever it is that our ego has decided to frighten us by on this particular day. It reminds me of the joke about the guy who's beating his head against the wall, and he's standing there, boom, 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 and this man comes along and goes, "Why are you beating your head against the wall?" And the man says, "Because it feels so good when I stop." Actually, if you think about that, that's a very, very profound spiritual truth. I've been thinking about it for years. Sometimes I'm like, that doesn't make any sense at all. But it makes deep, profound sense, truly, when you be with it for a little while. Matthew 27:46 says, in the 9th hour he asked God, "Why have you forsaken me?" Don't we do that in our scariest, most terrified times when something's looming that looks, we're waiting on the results of a medical test, or we've got to go to court over a financial issue, or we're in the throes of some terrible parting or loss of some kind? We think, where have you gone? Where have you been? But doesn't it remind you, for those of you who are too young, maybe you don't remember, your parents haven't shared it with you, but there was a poem that was popular in the 80s called The Footprints in the Sand, where the man asks, there's 2 sets of footprints, they're walking down the beach, and eventually he looks back and sees only 1 set of footprints, and he says, "God, why did you leave me?" And he says, "I haven't left you, I've been carrying you the whole way." But before Jesus' body died, he had come into himself. And he asked, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." That's something that came out, jumped on me when I was listening to Eckhart Tolle in this last year, and it's repeated itself over and over. And he says, not only should you forgive others for what they unconsciously did in their ignorance, but also you need to forgive yourself, because we all are unconscious. That's the whole journey, is that we're waking up. We're learning how to catch ourselves in our unconsciousness. We're learning that when we're judgmental, when we're angry, when we're lonely, when we're tired, all of that stuff is when we are unconscious. And we have to be diligent and convicted and committed to our awakening. So when you catch yourself doing that, breathe consciously, be present in the moment, and it will pass. There is only now. You're not going to have to worry about what's going to happen in the future. And the bottom line is, if you can be present in the now, things will shift for the better, just because you left them alone and let God do His work. One of the men that was crucified with Jesus on the hill asked him if there was any hope for him. And Jesus said, "Today you will be with me in paradise." And I thought about that, and I thought, well, either it was someone that he had judged, or the appearance of someone we have judged, that we have crucified, not been able to see the divinity in them, or it was an aspect of ourselves, which really is the same thing. But the bottom line is that he could see at that point the divinity in all beings. And that's our challenge, because our ego really wants us to believe that we're separate. And it's really challenging when you're in the face of someone who is unconscious to see the divinity in them, but that is the ultimate challenge. And there is hints everywhere. That is the spiritual challenge. If you will not leap outside of yourself and start blaming, but if you will take a look and say, what is this person, the Course in Miracles says, in my life to remind me of where I'm not healed? And it takes a great deal of courage. There's a lot of us who are afraid of re-experiencing the pain that we've experienced in the past. But we need to be courageous and do that for our ultimate healing. Because otherwise we stay entrapped in our own tombs of self-inflicted pain. For what? To suffer some more? So anyway, Jesus died, and He commended His spirit to God and crossed over. The next day, Mary Magdalene and others came to anoint the body, and the stone was rolled away, and there were two spirits standing there in their shining garments. And the frightened women were at their feet and shivering and whatnot, and the spirits said, "Why do you seek the loving amongst the dead?" We do that all the time too. We look for our thoughts, we look for our experience. We don't go to our source to look for a new way of thinking about this situation, a new way of escaping our own tombs of dead thoughts. We continue to think that those thought forms, if I could just have those thought forms work for me one more time, if I could just earn this much money, if I could quit drinking, if I could quit gambling, if she or he would quit drinking, gambling, I'd be okay. That is not where the answers are. It's just the appearance, it's the mirror, it's the lie. It's the unconsciousness. We have to be convicted, committed, absolutely, of catching ourselves doing that. It's so subtle that it's not hard work, it's just alertness to catch yourself. And if you have habits like I chew on my fingernails, that's a place where I go unconscious. So if I'm fearful, it's a pointer. You're afraid, okay, I got it. And then I can move on until the next time I stick my fingers in my mouth. It's an ongoing process. Jesus said in the Bible that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of the sinful and be crucified, and on the third day rise again.